They hid the most powerful force within you and called it a myth. From the moment you arrived in this world, you were taught to look outward for meaning, to chase purpose through noise, to place your faith in systems never meant to set you free. But buried deep within you is something ancient, something real, a dormant energy, coiled at the base of your spine, like a serpent, silent, patient, waiting. They said it was just a symbol, a metaphor, mystical nonsense, or worse, something dangerous. And yet, across thousands of years, from yogis and mystics to pharaohs and prophets, this same force appears again and again, whispered through symbols, protected by ritual, honored as sacred. They all spoke of it, because they knew to awaken it is to awaken everything. This isn't about trends, crystals, or surface-level spirituality. It's about truth, raw, electrical, undeniable truth. And once you feel it, nothing about your life will ever be the same. What is Kundulini? For centuries, humanity has been taught to chase power outside of itself through religion, governments, institutions, and gurus. But what if the greatest source of power has always been inside you, dormant, waiting to rise? Kundalini isn't just a spiritual concept tossed around in yoga studios or scribbled into esoteric books. It's an ancient energy technology, a living intelligence woven into your very biology. It has been revered by mystics, hidden by empires, and misunderstood by the modern world, not because it lacks truth, but because it holds too much of it. If this force were fully understood, the structures that profit from your confusion would collapse overnight. Kundalini is not about belief, it's about experience. It is the primal life force, coiled like a serpent at the base of the spine, waiting to uncoil and rise through your energetic system, triggering a total shift in perception, emotion, and consciousness. The ancient yogis of India mapped it in precise detail long before neuroscience even had a name. They described the chakras, not as abstract symbols but as energy gateways, each one corresponding to stages of human development, psychological evolution, and spiritual embodiment. They didn't imagine this, they experienced it. But over time, this knowledge was buried. Colonial conquest, religious dogma, and institutional fear all played their part in stripping the sacred from the scientific and labeling the inner experience as superstition. Even the symbol of the serpent was hijacked. In yogic tradition, the serpent represents raw energy, transformation, the path to enlightenment. In Western theology, it was turned into a villain, something to fear, avoid, and condemn. The very image that once guided initiates to higher realms was weaponized to keep the masses in spiritual infancy. What better way to control people than to convince them that their own awakening is evil? What better way to suppress the sacred than to make it forbidden? And yet the energy never left. It waits quietly in everyone. You don't have to be a monk or a mystic to carry Kundalini. You already do. It's built into your body, your breath, your nervous system. The only question is, will you ever access it? Some truths are too raw, too powerful, and too real for platforms like this one. If you want to go deeper, sign up to Insights Academy, our free newsletter through the link below, and get a digital copy of the Kundalini Guide. It's only available for a limited time. The truth about Kundalini. Kundalini is not a trend. It is a revolution of perception. It doesn't ask for followers. It demands truth seekers. People willing to shed the layers of false identity and face what lies underneath. That's why it's not taught in schools. That's why it's not on the front page of science journals or celebrated in mainstream spiritual circles. Because it doesn't sell obedience. It destroys it. Once this force begins to move within you, you can't be manipulated by fear, shamed by conformity, or seduced by superficiality. You begin to see with new eyes, think with new clarity, and feel with new depth. But it must be approached with respect, because Kundalini isn't passive. It amplifies what is already inside you. If you are grounded, clear, and humble, it can lead to profound transformation. If you are reckless, ego-driven, or unprepared, it can magnify confusion, This is why so many traditions placed it behind rituals, disciplines, and inner purification, not to keep people away from it, but to make sure they were ready. Because when the serpent rises, it doesn't just bring light, it brings everything. The repressed, the hidden, the unresolved. And that's where the real work begins. So, ask yourself, do you really want to awaken, not just to the light, but to the entire truth of who you are and who you've been conditioned to be? Because that's what Kundalini does. It's not an escape from reality. It's an immersion into the deepest layers of it. And once it begins, there's no going back to sleep. Kundalini isn't a buzzword. It isn't a metaphor. It isn't something made up by mystics to sell you a course or give you a fleeting sense of spiritual significance. It is real. It is alive, and it's already inside you. But what it is and what it is not has been twisted, diluted, and misunderstood for centuries. What you've likely been told about Kundalini is only the surface, and in some cases it's been entirely wrong, because the truth doesn't fit neatly into modern spiritual branding or textbook psychology. The truth is that Kundalini is the raw, undiluted energy of consciousness itself, an ancient biological intelligence embedded in the human form. At its core, Kundalini is your life force in its purest state, not your personality, not your thoughts, not your habits. It is what powers all of it. It sits coiled at the base of your spine in a place referred to as the Muladhara chakra in yogic philosophy. But this isn't symbolic language. It's anatomical spiritual code. It's there, latent, woven into your nervous system and endocrine responses. Quiet, but ready. And when it awakens, it moves, not randomly, not chaotically, but through your body's subtle architecture, activating every part of you that's been asleep. Your intuition, your perception, your emotions, your memory, even your biology. But here's where it gets dangerous. Not Kundalini itself, but what we've been taught to believe about it. In much of the modern West, Kundalini is packaged as a product. You'll see it on the cover of magazines, in workshops promising instant enlightenment, in classes claiming you'll feel activated in a single weekend. That's not awakening. That's a performance. Real Kundalini awakening isn't a peak moment. It's a process. And often, it's not glamorous. It's not clean, not marketable, not instantly Instagrammable. Because real awakening means being torn open. It means the collapse of everything false. It means surrendering the image you've carefully built of yourself, what you think you are, what you believe, and even what you fear. That's what Kundalini does. It breaks the illusion of who you were so it can reveal who you've always been. It is not a rush of euphoria or a mystical high. Those things may happen along the way, but they're not the point. Kundalini is not here to entertain you. It is here to transform you. And transformation is rarely comfortable. This energy will expose everything. Your pain, your trauma, your attachments, your ego. That's why it has been protected in sacred traditions with such discipline. It was never meant to be mass-marketed. It was meant to be respected. And no, it isn't just for monks or gurus. It's for anyone with a nervous system but it asks something of you that few are willing to give. Total honesty. Not just honesty with others, but with yourself. Because this energy doesn't respond to performance or performance-based spirituality. It doesn't rise just because you're wearing white clothes or chanting mantras. It rises when you're aligned. It rises when your inner world becomes still, steady, and open. It rises when the noise of your life no longer drowns out the signal of your truth. What Kundalini is not, is a shortcut. It's not a bypass to wisdom. If anything, it's a fast track to everything you've been avoiding. This is why people who awaken prematurely, or without guidance, often experience confusion, emotional chaos, or physical discomfort. It's not because Kundalini is dangerous. It's because it magnifies whatever hasn't been healed yet. It doesn't let you hide. And if you've been hiding from yourself for a long time, that exposure can feel like a storm. But that storm is sacred. It clears the way for something real. Because when Kundalini moves, it doesn't just change how you feel. It rewires how you live. It demands presence. It rewrites your relationship with your body, your thoughts, your choices. It burns through illusion. And what remains is not some floating enlightened version of you. It's the real you, awake, embodied, and fully alive. Kundalini awakening. There's a myth that awakening Kundalini is like flipping a light switch, one sudden moment of bliss, ecstasy, and enlightenment. But the truth is far more nuanced, far more real. When this energy begins to stir, it doesn't announce itself politely. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about your schedule. It moves in waves, powerful, unpredictable, and deeply intelligent. And when it does, your body becomes the temple and the battlefield all at once. Some people experience intense heat, rising through the spine as if their bones are glowing from within. Others tremble uncontrollably, not from fear, but from a current that's too powerful to suppress. You may feel pressure in the forehead, strange tingling in your limbs, or a sudden rush of emotion that comes out of nowhere, crying, laughing, shaking, collapsing into stillness. These aren't symptoms of madness. They're signs that something deeper is waking up. Kundalini doesn't rise through logic. It rises through surrender. And that's why the process can be so confronting. Because surrender is terrifying to the ego. It's the death of control, of certainty, of all the labels and stories you've wrapped around yourself to feel safe. When Kundalini begins to move, it doesn't care about who you think you are. It's only interested in what's real. It pushes your shadows to the surface. The unhealed grief, the buried shame, the beliefs you've outgrown, but never questioned. They all rise. This is what most people don't expect. They come looking for cosmic fireworks and get hit with a flood of suppressed emotion instead. But this is the real initiation. Kundalini awakening isn't always beautiful. In fact, much of it is raw, confusing, even painful. You might lose interest in things that once obsessed you. Relationships can fall apart, not out of cruelty, but because they were built on versions of you that no longer exist. You may feel lost, disoriented, detached from the world. That isn't failure. That's transformation. You're not losing your mind. You're shedding the identity you built to survive in a world that never taught you who you truly were. And still, even amidst the chaos, there are moments so pure, so still, so unexplainable, that you know something divine is happening. A peace that doesn't make sense. A clarity that cuts through years of noise. A connection to everything and nothing at once. These are the glimpses that keep you going. They're not rewards. They're reminders. Reminders that the pain has a purpose, that you're not being broken. You're being reassembled. The problem is modern spirituality rarely prepares people for this. It sells awakening as a product, a peak state, a performance, a badge of honor. But Kundalini isn't impressed by how spiritual you look. It's moved by how honest you're willing to be. Are you ready to face the parts of yourself you've disowned? Are you willing to feel what you've numbed for years? Are you willing to walk away from everything that keeps you small just to meet the version of you that's been buried under layers of programming? This is why ancient traditions demanded discipline before initiation, not to exclude people, but to protect them. Because once the energy begins to rise, there's no turning back. You either evolve with it, or get consumed by your resistance to it. That's why preparation is everything. Your body must be able to hold it. Your mind must be able to witness it. And your soul must be willing to let go. Some awakenings happen gradually, like a slow fire that builds over years. Others arrive like lightning, sudden, shocking, undeniable. There is no single map, but the deeper truth is that your soul already knows what's required. Your role isn't to control the process, it's to make yourself available to it, to clean out the internal noise, to sit in stillness, to cultivate awareness so that when the energy knocks, you're able to open the door with reverence, not fear, because that's what this is at its core. A return to reverence, not for tradition or doctrine, but for life itself, for the divine spark that pulses through your spine, waiting to be remembered. It doesn't need you to chase it. It needs you to be ready for it. And readiness doesn't mean perfection. It means truth, presence, courage. Kundalini doesn't just awaken you to some higher realm, it awakens you to this realm, to the sacredness of your body, your breath, your emotions, your pain. It awakens you to everything, and that's why it changes everything. The origins of Kundalini. Long before the word Kundalini was ever written in English, ancient civilizations were already working with it, honoring it, and building entire spiritual frameworks around it. They didn't call it energy, the way we do now, but they knew it, they felt it, they lived by it, because they understood what we've forgotten, that within the human body lies the key to transcending the human condition, and that power was never out there, it was always inside. In the yogic traditions of ancient India, Kundalini was seen as the sacred feminine force, Shakti, lying dormant, waiting to rise and reunite with Shiva, the divine masculine seated at the crown. This wasn't a myth, this was sacred science. The entire system of chakras, nadis, mantras and mudras, was designed to support this inner resurrection. Yogis trained for years, sometimes decades, in silence, discipline, and devotion, not to achieve status, but to prepare the body for this awakening. They weren't seeking escapism, they were cultivating the capacity to hold divine energy in a human form. But India wasn't alone. The symbols appear across cultures, across continents, and across thousands of years, too consistently to be coincident. In ancient Egypt, the uraeus, the cobra rising from the forehead of pharaohs, was not just decoration, it represented awakened consciousness. The coiled serpent energy having risen through the spine and activating the third eye. The Eye of Horus, not just a symbol of protection, but a map of inner sight. The staff of Hermes in Greek tradition, the caduceus, two serpents entwined around a central staff, is nearly identical to the Ida and Pingala nadis of yogic anatomy. And in early Gnostic Christianity, long before church councils rewrote the narrative, there were whispers of the sacred feminine, Sophia, as the source of divine wisdom within. This knowledge wasn't separated by geography, it was encoded in symbols, hidden in myth, passed in whispers through generations of mystics, healers, and seekers. But slowly, something changed. As power centralized, truth was fragmented. Those who had access to this knowledge either guarded it in mystery schools or had it stolen and distorted. The feminine was demonized. The serpent became a symbol of evil, the sacred body became shameful, and the divine energy within us was pushed into the shadows, not because it was false, but because it was powerful. Colonialism didn't just conquer land, it conquered consciousness. It dismantled indigenous knowledge systems, dismissed them as primitive, and replaced them with ideologies that served control, not liberation. Western psychology pathologized spiritual experiences. Religion externalized divinity. And science, for all its brilliance, amputated the soul from the body of its inquiry. What remained was a hollowed-out version of the human being, rational, manageable, disconnected from the inner fire. But still, the symbols survived, hidden in plain sight, in sacred texts, ancient art, mythologies, architecture. The spiral, the snake, the staff, the eye, the tree, all metaphors for the same thing, the ascent of energy, the evolution of consciousness through the human body. The story was never truly lost, just buried beneath the noise of dogma and distraction. And now, slowly, it returns, not through institutions, but through individuals. People are feeling the stirrings again. Dreams, sensations, spontaneous awakenings. They're remembering what their ancestors once lived by. That we were never meant to stay asleep. That this life, this body, this breath, it's all part of the design. You don't need to become someone else to awaken. You need to remember who you are before the forgetting. The hidden history of Kundalini isn't just about the past. It's a mirror for the present. It shows us what was stolen and what still lives inside us. It reminds us that the journey upward is ancient, sacred, and written into the very structure of the human being. And no matter how long it's been suppressed, distorted, or commercialized, Truth has a way of returning. All it needs is one thing: someone ready to receive it. The chakras. If Kundalini is the serpent, the chakras are the gates it must pass through, and the nedis are the hidden rivers that carry its fire. This is not abstract mysticism. It is an energetic anatomy, mapped out by sages thousands of years ago, with a level of precision modern science is only beginning to approach. The body as we know it is not just flesh and bone, it is a multi-dimensional field of consciousness. And the systems of Kundalini are the blueprint for activating it. There are over 72,000 nedis, subtle energy channels that crisscross the human system like an invisible web. Of the three are considered most vital. Ida flows along the left side of the spine, linked to the moon, the feminine, the cooling force. Pingala flows on the right, associated with the sun, the masculine theat. Sushumna, the central channel running through the spine. It is through Sushumna that Kundalini rises. When the inner balance is right, when duality dissolves, and when the mind no longer blocks the current, the serpent ascends, piercing through the chakras, spinning energy centers that sit at key points along the spine. But these aren't decorations for Instagram posts. Each chakra is a complex interface between mind, body and soul. Root chakra, Muladhara, governs safety and survival. Sacral chakra, Svadhisthana, rules emotion and creativity. Solar plexus, Manipura, deals with identity and will. Heart chakra, Anahata, holds compassion, connection. Throat chakra, Vishuddha, governs truth and expression. Third eye, Ajna, opens vision and intuition. Crown, Sahasrara, the gateway to the divine. But here's what few people will tell you. Awakening the chakras isn't just about color, visualizations, or repeating affirmations. It's a dismantling process. When Kundalini activates a chakra, it doesn't just bless it, it cleans it. It forces out what's blocking it. That's why people report intense emotions, vivid dreams and physical sensations. These aren't side effects. They're signs that the old programming, emotional repression, trauma, limiting beliefs, is being burned away. Kundalini is not gentle. It doesn't whisper. It clears. Each chakra corresponds not just to a physical organ or emotional theme, but also to a developmental stage of life. The lower chakras are tied to early childhood, our sense of security, our emotional bonding, our individuality. If these stages were disrupted, abandoned, or manipulated, then the energy gets trapped there. When Kundalini reaches those centers, it pushes that stuck energy to the surface so it can be faced and healed, and only then can it move higher. That's why the ascent isn't linear. You don't move from one chakra to the next, like climbing stairs. You spiral, return, revisit. One moment you're feeling expansive and enlightened. The next you're plunged back into old wounds. This is the sacred cycle of purification. And it continues until the energy can flow freely, not just through your spine, but through your whole life. Because the goal isn't to escape the body, the goal is to bring light into it. Not to bypass the human experience, but to illuminate it from the inside. When all the chakras are awakened, aligned and balanced, not in theory but in lived reality, Kundalini reaches the crown. This isn't the end, it's the beginning of a new mode of existence. One where you don't just think with your mind, you think with your whole being. One where intuition becomes as sharp as sight. One where love stops being an emotion and becomes a state of awareness. This is what the mystics meant by enlightenment, not floating away, but arriving fully here, embodied, awake. You are not a mistake. You are not broken. You are a layered being carrying imprints and energies across lifetimes. And Kundalini knows the path home. Not because it was taught, but because it is encoded in you. The chakras aren't just portals. They are your story, your map, your key. And the moment you stop seeking power outside of yourself and start tending to the temple within, that story begins to awake. The science. For years, the conversation around Kundalini was confined to temples, ashrams and secret circles of mystics. It was dismissed by mainstream science as fantasy or pseudo-spiritual metaphor. too mystical to be real, too ancient to be credible. But slowly something shifted. As technology advanced and the tools to measure the subtle began to emerge, science started brushing up against truths that yogis had spoken of for millennia. It couldn't be ignored forever, because what they called prana, ti, or kundalini, we now understand in fragments as electromagnetic fields, neural activity, and bioelectric charge. The language is different, but the reality is converging. Your body isn't just a biological machine, it's an energy system, alive, responsive, and intelligent. Every cell pulses with charge. Your heart emits an electromagnetic field that can be measured meters away from your body. Your brain operates not just chemically, but electrically, firing frequencies that shift with your state of awareness. This isn't fringe science. It's measurable, observable fact. And it brings us closer to understanding how something like Kundalini could exist. Not as a myth, but as a form of energy the West has simply failed to name. Brainwave states offer a key insight. Most people live in beta, the state of waking consciousness, of thinking, analyzing, doing. But as you relax, drop into meditation, or even deep creativity, your brain shifts into alpha, theta, or delta states. These slower frequencies allow access to subconscious material, emotional release, and profound insight. During deep spiritual practices or spontaneous awakenings, many report entering gamma states, high-frequency brainwaves, linked bliss, unity consciousness, and heightened perception. What mystics describe as oneness or divine union, science records as altered neural activity. Kundalini appears to act like a biological upgrade, intensifying perception, rewiring emotional responses, enhancing the body's sensitivity to energy. Studies in neurotheology and transpersonal psychology have started documenting what practitioners have long known, that spiritual experiences leave physiological footprints. Breathwork changes blood chemistry, meditation rewires gray matter, trauma release rewrites emotional patterns. There is a bridge being built, and the scientific mind is beginning to walk across it. Then there's the nervous system. The vagus nerve, often called the soul nerve, links the brain to the body's core functions, heart rate, digestion, breath. It is central to emotional regulation, and highly active in people with deep meditative or spiritual practice. Many symptoms of Kundalini awakening, tremors, spontaneous breathing shifts, waves of euphoria or dread, mirror what occurs during vagal activation. It's not coincidence. The ancient yogic maps described the same phenomenon using language available to them, what we now call neuroplasticity. They experienced as energy transformation. Some researchers have explored Kundalini in the context of the spinal cord and cerebrospinal fluid. The fluid that bathes your brain and spine is not inert. It pulses, it carries nutrients, hormones, and some suggest information. Certain meditative techniques aim to circulate this fluid intentionally, stimulating pineal gland activity and enhancing perception. The serpent rise, perhaps it's not so far removed from the reality of energy and fluid dynamics moving up the spinal column, lighting up centers along the way. Of course, science still struggles with anything it can't measure, dissect, or replicate. Kundalini won't fit neatly into a lab experiment, because it's not a one-size-fits-all experience. It's personal, unpredictable, deeply intimate. But that doesn't make it less real. It just makes it beyond the current scope of reductionist thinking. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Kundalini is meant to break the molds, not just within us, but around us. Maybe it exists to remind us that life is bigger than equations, and consciousness isn't a byproduct of the brain, but the field in which the brain arises. You don't need to choose between science and spirit. The true path forward lies in integration, not clinging blindly to tradition, and not worshipping intellect as the only God. Kundalini lives in the space between. It is the evidence of a body animated by consciousness, and a consciousness grounded in form. And the more we listen, the more we observe, the more we align, the closer we get to that ultimate truth. The universe isn't out there. It's in you, waiting to wake up. It's in you, From the moment you're old enough to sit still and raise your hand, you're told what to think, what to memorize, what to believe. But you're never taught the truth about the energy pulsing within your own body. You're never told that you carry a force capable of awakening you to your highest self. Why? Because systems built on control don't benefit from individuals who are self-aware, self-regulating, and spiritually sovereign. Real awakening creates disruption. It creates people who question authority, reject false narratives, stop living for external approval. And that's the last thing a control-based system wants. Education, as we know it, was never designed to free you. It was designed to format you, to prepare you for industry, for obedience, for predictability. Sit in rows, follow instructions, raise your hand to speak. The curriculum may change, but the structure doesn't. What's absent in almost every classroom is a conversation about consciousness, energy, breath, awareness, what it means to be fully human, and what you don't learn, you don't value. You're taught that success means fitting into a mold, not breaking out of one. And so the inner world is quietly dismissed. The result, a society disconnected from its own power, trained to see the body as a burden, emotions as weakness, stillness as laziness. Kundulini challenges all of it. It reclaims the body as sacred, honors emotion as intelligence, elevates inner experience as valid and vital. And that kind of thinking is dangerous to a system that thrives on external control. Because once a person connects to the energy within them, they become harder to manipulate. They stop being seduced by empty promises. They stop numbing themselves with distractions. They start listening to the truth inside and acting from that place. And that kind of alignment, it's revolutionary. This is why Kundalini has been hidden, mocked, and misunderstood in the West. Not because it's false, but because it's powerful. Western institutions, academic, religious, political, have systematically removed the sacred from the everyday. They've separated the mind from the body, the spirit from science. And in doing so, they've created a culture that's technologically advanced but spiritually starved. We have more access to information than ever before, but very little wisdom. We can send rockets to space, but struggle to sit with ourselves in silence. And what about the medical world? So much of what people experience during spiritual awakening, energy surges, emotional releases, spontaneous movements, is quickly labeled as pathology. Instead of guidance, they're offered diagnosis. Instead of tools, they're given pills. That's not healing, that's suppression. And again, it's not because doctors are malicious. It's because the system they operate in has no framework for inner energy. It wasn't built to see beyond the physical. It wasn't built to understand the soul. But things are shifting. Slowly, quietly, beneath the surface. More people are waking up, asking different questions, refusing to ignore what they feel inside. They're realizing that the true curriculum was never in the classroom. It's in the breath, the body, the silence, the longing. They're reclaiming practices that were once called primitive. They're remembering that the ancients weren't naive, they were initiated. And they're no longer willing to pretend that everything real can be measured in a lab or approved by an institution. Because the truth is, you were born with everything you need. The map is within you. The energy is within you. The intelligence is within you. And the moment you begin to trust that, really trust it, you step outside the cycle of dependence and into something far more powerful. Self-initiation. You don't need permission to awaken. You don't need a certificate to explore your conscious need. You need courage, curiosity, and to unlearn everything that taught you to doubt yourself. Kundalini isn't reserved for saints or sages. It's in the single mother meditating before her kids wake up. The quiet seeker who's tired of surface answers. You, right now, whether you recognize it or not. And once you do, the systems that tried to suppress you no longer stand a chance. Preparation. Kundalini doesn't rise on demand. You can't force it open with ambition, or summon it like a trick. It's not a reward for being spiritual enough, or a badge for performing the right rituals. This energy doesn't respond to ego, it responds to readiness. And readiness isn't about how much you know, it's about how willing you are to unlearn, clear out what no longer serves, make space for what's already within you to unfold. Preparation isn't optional, it's the foundation, because when this energy moves, it moves through everything. Your nervous system, your memories, your emotions, your thoughts. If you are blocked, it will show you where. If you are rigid, it will confront you. If you are open, it will teach you. That's why the first step is not activation, it's purification. Not in some religious sense, but energetically. Can your system handle the intensity? Can your mind stay steady when your identity begins to crack? This is why the ancient traditions didn't just teach meditation, they taught discipline, daily practice, breath work, fasting, silence. Not to punish the body, but to refine it, to make it a clear vessel, not clouded by distraction or overwhelmed by chaos. In a world that glorifies stimulation, stillness becomes sacred, and that stillness isn't passive, it's powerful. It tunes you to the subtle, trains you to feel, teaches you how to witness, not react. When Kundalini moves, the witness is everything. Without it, you drown in the intensity. With it, you navigate it. Start with the body, not by pushing it, but by listening. What does it need to feel safe, grounded, alert? Movement helps. Yoga, walking, stretching, but not to perform, just to connect. Breath is the bridge. It tells you everything about your state. Shallow breath, scattered mind. Deep breath, anchored presence. Learn to breathe on purpose. Not just when you're meditating, but when you're living. Awareness doesn't begin on the cushion. It begins in every moment you choose to return to yourself. Emotionally, preparation means honesty. Can you tell the truth about how you feel? Can you sit with discomfort without trying to fix it? Can you forgive the parts of yourself you were taught to hide? This energy will surface whatever you suppress, not to punish you, but to liberate you. But liberation isn't light without shadow. If you're seeking only bliss, you're not seeking truth. The truth includes all of it. Pain, joy, rage, love. The more you can hold, the more you can transform. Mentally, the practice is humility. You're not here to control Kundalini, you're here to surrender to it. That doesn't mean being passive, it means being available. Watching your patterns, letting go of the need to label every sensation, to explain every shift. Let the experience teach you. Don't try to master it. Let it master you until mastery becomes natural, not forced. And most importantly, drop the rush. Awakening is not a race. This isn't about getting somewhere. The energy already knows the way. You just have to stop blocking it. Stop chasing peak states, spiritual highs, enlightenment as a destination. Kundalini doesn't care about your vision board, it cares about your presence. Integrity, willingness to feel it all. If you're reading this and something in you stirs, not your curiosity, but something deeper, quieter, more certain, that's a sign. Not that you should chase Kundalini, but that you might be ready to be still enough to meet it. The doorway is already there. The serpent waits. All it asks is that when it rises, you don't flinch. That when the fire comes, you welcome it, not as a threat, but as a guide. Discipline isn't restriction, it's devotion, not to a belief system, but to your own becoming. Not to a guru, but to the sacredness of what you carry. You are not preparing for a moment, you are preparing for a lifetime of clarity. A life built, not on what you were taught, but on what you've remembered. The return. When Kundalini rises, it doesn't just change how you feel inside, it changes how you see everything outside. It alters the lens through which you interpret the world. Things that once consumed your attention begin to fall away. The endless chase for approval, possessions or validation starts to feel hollow, not because you've become indifferent, but because you've tuned into a frequency that runs deeper than surface noise. You begin to recognize what's real, what's worth your energy, what's been draining you for years without you even noticing. This is the part of awakening that doesn't get talked about enough. The integration, the return. Because after the fire, after the flood, after the bliss and the breakdowns comes the quiet question, how do I live now? And the answer isn't always clear. You don't get handed a script. You're not given a title. You just start to move through the world differently. Slower, sharper, softer, fiercer. You speak less, but with more weight. You listen more, but with more depth. You begin to notice the sacred in the mundane. The way the light moves across the floor. The rhythm of your own breath. The truth behind someone's words. Life stops being a blur and starts becoming a mirror. But with this new sight comes responsibility. Kundulini doesn't make you better than others. It simply makes you more aware. And awareness brings choices. Will you live in alignment, or will you betray what you now know? Will you honor what your intuition tells you, even if it goes against the grain? This isn't about being perfect. It's about being real, about living in a way that doesn't abandon the truth you've touched. The world will keep moving fast. People will keep selling you distractions. But once this energy has awakened in you, something irreversible happens. You stop falling for illusion. You start feeling the weight of what's false. You can't go back to pretending. That doesn't mean you withdraw from life. It means you enter it fully, but on your own terms. You may still work a job, pay bills, navigate challenges. But underneath it all, there's a stillness that doesn't move, a clarity that doesn't shake. And that is what real freedom feels like. Living with Kundalini isn't about escaping reality. It's about expanding it, seeing with more eyes, hearing with more ears, feeling with more of yourself than ever before. You'll have moments where everything feels overwhelming, because you're sensing not just the surface but the undercurrents. But you'll also have moments of profound peace, not because life is easy, but because you are anchored in something eternal. The ego will try to make this about status, about being special. Don't let it. You are not awakening to rise above others. You are awakening to reconnect with them, to see the divine in every face, every failure, every breath. That's the real gift of Kundalini, not power over life, but union with it. You've come a long way through this journey, not just through the ideas, but through the reminders. Something inside you already knows what you've just read. This wasn't new, it was ancient memory surfacing. Now the question is, what will you do with it? Don't let this just be information. Let it be integration. Let it live in your choices, your breath, your relationships. Let it shape the way you wake up in the morning, the way you speak to yourself, the way you create and contribute. Because awakening isn't something you had, it's something you become, day by day, truth by truth, breath by breath. And if you're ready to go deeper beyond what we can always share here, join Insights Academy, our free newsletter. You'll receive hidden teachings, deeper reflections, and a digital copy of the Kybalion, completely free. But more than that, you'll step into a space crafted for seekers, not spectators. For those who long not just to know, but to transform. Don't wait. What's waiting for you is far greater than just an email. It's a new way of seeing. If this message resonated, let us know in the comments. Your voice matters, and your path is just beginning.